Hope everybody is doing well. Definitely, it is another edition of the World Edition. And I know one of the things that is going on is that there is sports news. So, definitely, one of the things that I was checking out was the Hurricanes apparently won in overtime. That is the team right here in the Carolinas. I know Nick, I think, was trying to get to a game, and I need to get to a game as well, as they will be in the conference finals. And I think that they might even have the home court advantage in the conference finals, but there'll definitely be a few games here in Raleigh and all in that space. But they won in overtime, so they did advance to the finals. And then I watched a couple of other sports games on yesterday as well. Watched definitely the 76ers and the Boston Celtics. The Celtics staved off elimination and will now force a game 7 over there in Boston and all in that space. Was actually rooting for the 76ers as I went to school with Doc Rivers, but he did not pull that win out and all along those lines. So we'll see if he can do it on the road and that space. And then the other game that I watched, I think it wound up watching me more than I watched it because it was definitely a laugher as Denver just totally rolled over Phoenix and all in that space. So I did see that in the news and a number of other things that were happening in that lane. So that was some of the things that were on my mind in terms of the nice weather and some of the sports news. And of course, there is hard hitting news in the world as well. So a Daniel Penny, the man who choked Subway rider Jordan Neely, will be facing manslaughter charges. So that is something that is coming down. And he is a Marine veteran, but he is going to be facing some charges after that chokehold death and all in that space. And a lot of people are paying attention to what is going on with the migrants over there at the U.S. Mexico border, because apparently that is hit record highs as Title 42 has ended. So migrants gathered on both sides of the U.S. Mexico border on Thursday, hours before immigration restrictions known as Title 42 expire, with some rushing to cross ahead of new tough asylum rules that will replace a COVID era order. So U.S. Customs and Border Protection in recent days has been holding up to 28,000 migrants at its facilities, far beyond its stated capacity, and it would appear to be a record. Two federal officials requesting anonymity and the Border Patrol Union gave those figures and all in that. So the busiest border detention facilities are in the Rio Grande Valley and El Paso in Texas, and two areas in Arizona, according to Union President Brandon Judge. This week, the number of people caught crossing illegally topped 10,000 per day. Due to the high volume of arrivals, agents on Wednesday began releasing some migrants without a notice to appear in immigration court where they can make an asylum claim, telling them to report to an immigration office later, according to Judge. So on Thursday night, a federal judge in Florida blocked such releases, saying they were similar to a policy previously enjoined in March due to a failure to follow proper regulatory procedures. And definitely, it looks like the Border Patrol did not respond to some of the media's calls for comments and all in that kind of way. So definitely folks seem to be coming, and not just from Mexico, but from various parts of the world, because um, under Title 42 in place since March of 2020 and set to expire at midnight, hundreds of thousands of migrants have been quickly expelled to Mexico. But because Mexico only accepted the return of certain nationalities, mostly their own citizens and Central Americans, and more recently Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans, migrants from other countries have largely been allowed in to pursue their immigration claims. So we're going to see what happens now that this is going on and all in that space, as President Joe Biden's administration is planning to send more personnel and funds to the border while implementing the new regulation, which will deny asylum to almost all migrants who cross illegally. So we're going to see what folks have to say about that in a matter of a minute or two. And I might even try to get some people that I know that are in that whole migrant policy area to come into some future shows and all in that kind of space. So definitely it'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about that, as well as the debt ceiling, because apparently that is also going on, and we're going to see whether things go one way or the other in that kind of space. And of course, a lot of people are paying attention to the war in Ukraine and how that is going. I think that Sasha said that he is expecting a Ukrainian offense at any point of time and everything. So we're going to see what happens in that sense. But then we're also hearing that Ukraine is trying to keep up its momentum after military advances in Bakhmut. So definitely that is something that is going on as well. And over there in Turkey, Turkey's Erdogan is facing his toughest test yet in a landmark election. So we do know that Turkey has played some role in some of the things around the world, and they have a landmark election coming up in the very near future. So definitely that will be interesting to see how that goes. And there's somebody that is being tried over there in Russia after she left a note apparently on his parents' grave. So Russian woman has been convicted after leaving a note on grave of Putin's parents, in which she was saying that he had raised a freak, and definitely some other insulting kinds of things as well. But it looks like she's been convicted and all in that space. So definitely there is some protests that are going on even in Russia, but what kind of response you get and what kind of quick justice they decide to put on, that's a whole nother matter and all in that space. But the last thing I'll mention, and then I'll bring in Dan and Lee Newton Rhodes, is that it looks like Israel has killed an Islamic Jihad commander in its Gaza missile strikes. And definitely it looks like the Jihad has been targeting Jerusalem for the first time as it fires a barrage of rockets at Israel. So there's definitely conflict going on there as fears grip Palestinians and Israelis under fire for the fourth day. And South Africa is trying to restore its U.S. relations amid the whole thing around Russia arms and all in that space. So U.S. ambassadors has accused South Africa of supplying arms to Russia. And I know that, there's always been kind of interesting relations between the U.S. and Russia, even dating back to the apartheid era and all in that space. So we're going to bring up some of the other columnists, guests, and see what they've got to say and all in that space. There are regular commentators and all in that kind of way. So I'm going to bring them up and we'll see if anybody else shows up. If you're wondering about weather, as we did have the guy from Climatize on yesterday, it looks like there's some strong weather that is heading over that area of Bengal. So definitely Cyclone Mocha is strengthening in the Bay of Bengal, and it looks like it is heading toward Myanmar and Bangladesh. So hundreds of thousands are to be evacuated in those two areas as they brace for that whole storm to be coming their way and all in that kind of thoughts. But right now I'm going to bring in Dan Worthington and Lee Newton Rhodes to see what they've got to say about the immigration and other things that are happening in the world. Lee is oftentimes paying attention to news items as well, so maybe he saw something that I didn't see. And we'll see when and if Sasha comes in so we can learn more about what is happening in that part of the world, as he is oftentimes right on top of that and all in that space. So how you doing, Lee? How you doing, Dan?
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Mark. Yeah,
hey, how you doing?
I'm just curious. Ukraine and Russia are at war. I mean, it's real. We believe it. We're told it. What have you?
Right.
It's a war zone. Didn't Biden go there a few weeks ago? And now you got the teachers union going there. Randy Weingard is. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. Is a war zone the proper place for a vacation spot?
I would not think that I would want to go to a war zone for a vacation.
No, why are all these people going there? I don't understand.
Lobbying different folks.
It's tokenism. It's tokenism.
No, Dan, I get that, and I agree with you. But to go to a war zone during a war, maybe we're not being told the truth about what's been going on.
It's virtue signaling.
Yeah, I know, but maybe it's not as dangerous as it's portrayed by the media. Am I wrong?
The clips that I have seen from, and of course, the sources that he has given, and he is biased as well. But definitely, if you watch the Ukraine Russia show and all in that space, Ivan, who Alpha Times is reporting from Kyiv, brings up various videos, and it looks quite horrendous in those videos. But
I'm sure the videos are real. I'm not denying that. But really is going on the ground. The State Department all the time issues warnings to people: don't travel to country X because terror threats.
Right. Well, we're going to find out because Sasha's here, and Sasha might have some thoughts around that. Sasha, how are you doing?
Hi.
Hey, Sasha.
So,
Sorry, what's your question?
Why are these idiots from the United States going to Ukraine?
Why are so many people from the United States, whether Biden, Randy Weingarten, the teachers union, going to Ukraine, which is a war zone, and putting their lives in jeopardy? I don't understand. Is it a vacation spot or is it a war zone?
Well, it depends. If they're going for vacation, there are much safer spots.
Agreed.
Go. Okay. So they have some special goals why they would go there. And one of those goals could be to fight for Ukraine against Russians. And if that's the case, and they have international brigades in Ukraine, when a lot of people from different countries, including US and England and Poland and France, and it could be as many as probably 50 countries. So people from these countries are fighting for Ukraine in international brigades. The average American will never understand that. And that's fine. Let's just leave it at that.
But the average American probably should not be going there on vacation.
Probably not, no.
Probably not.
So why are teachers' unions going there? I understand maybe people, State Department, people in the military, people who can do something, maybe even the media. But teachers' unions, why? I don't get it. I really don't.
You have to ask them. You have to ask them. That's the easiest way to do it.
Well, part of it, and I could be wrong, but clarify for me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Zelensky also involved in union work in his country? So it would not surprise me if Zelensky did not invite some of these folks over to bolster public opinion and to bolster support, because I thought that there was a time, in addition to being a entertainer, that Zelensky was also involved in some union work in that area as well. But if I'm wrong, please correct me, Sasha.
No, Mark, I think that Zelensky is too busy to invite this American unions, or what you're talking about, teachers unions. Ukrainians just a day ago started a very strong attack against Russians, and Zelensky is spearheading that with his generals. I don't think that he has even 2.5 minutes to spend with American or any other unions.
Can you tell me, Sasha, about what you're hearing about Bakhmut? Because I didn't mention that, and apparently they were saying it was a heavy offensive from, I guess, the Russian side on Bakhmut, and I know they've been doing that regularly. But is there any danger of that area falling? And it seems like it's a small area, so even if it falls, how significant would that
be? What's significant is that Russians failed to take Bakhmut, a little city or even town with, 50,000 people or so. They failed to take it in about 10 months' time. And now Ukrainians are taking them out of there. Russians enduring heavy losses. The Ukrainians prepared several brigades, which are complex attacking units based on the NATO training and NATO war experience. So I think that especially Russians, they didn't even know where to expect the Ukrainian attack, because there is a long front line, about 1,000 kilometers. So at any point, at any given time, there could be a Ukrainian attack, and very substantial. And Russia knew about it. And right now, Ukrainians slowly starting, but very surely, they're starting to open up the front lines and infiltrate it in many places. And Bakhmut is just one of them. And this private army of Prigozhin, They failed, although he promised to Putin that he will take Bakhmut before the 1st May, before the 9th May, whatever June. He's not going to make it. First of all, I don't think that in a month's time he will be alive. And second of all, it's just, God, it's impossible. It's not going to happen.
We're going to bring in Steve. Steve's apparently traveling and everything. So we got Steve with us, and we've also got Jacoby with us as well. And we'll see if he pops in and everything along those lines. But one of the other things that I was going to ask is there is another part of the world that is going and having conflict. It is also in Eastern Europe that I was reading about. And I was wondering, does that going to be a concern to the Russians as well? So you would know a lot more than I would about Armenia and Azerbaijan. So if you can definitely talk a little bit about that from what you're hearing, because there's definitely a deadly clashes that are taking place on that border as well. And I know that's been going on for a while, but it looks like those clashes are threatening to derail those peace talks that were taking place in that part of the world. So it seems to me that Russia's got problems on both sides of its
it has many more problems than that. Actually, Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict is the easiest one because Armenia, much weaker and smaller republic. Azerbaijan is completely tied up with Turkey, and they have the joint army. The Turkish-Azerbaijani army is one unit. And not only Armenia has no business to fight them, even Russia cannot fight them. So it's a losing proposition for Armenia. It's just a question whether they will accept it and just go by everyday's life, or they will want to fight again. If they will fight, Azerbaijani army will destroy them, and very, very quickly. So that's not an option. And if it's not an option, you have to be a good boy and say, hello, I'm there to be friends. And, do the normal thing what weaker nations or weaker people are going to do in this life, right? And if not, then you'll be punished.
And speaking of being punished, there were accusations in a couple of elections here in the U.S., not just the last one, but even the ones before that, of Russian interference. But apparently that is also going on in Turkey, because there is the Turkish opposition. And I just mentioned that that election is going on, but the Erdogan rival is saying that he has evidence of Russia's online campaign ahead of that election. So he is accusing Russia of election interference days before the vote. And of course, the Kremlin has strongly denied accusations of meddling in Turkish votes. I would think that with the war in Ukraine and as busy as they are in that whole war, that they wouldn't have time to be doing meddling. But what do I know? I'm not there in Russia and everything. But what is your thoughts about this? This is for anybody on the panel, about this notion of Russian interference in elections, whether that's here or in Turkey.
Well,
yeah. Mark, can you hear me?
Can
you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, I'm driving today, so I apologize, but I want to give my insight too on a couple of issues before I leave. But I just want okay. Go ahead, Sasha.
Russia has enough people to put some of them to do all this posting on social media and elsewhere. That's not a big deal. Russia have enough of those people available. They're paying them some money to do that. So it's business as usual. I don't think it's a great deal. Russia has also problems on near Moldova with the breakaway, how they call it, the Dniester Republic. Russia occupied parts of Georgia. Russia has occupied former Königsberg, which is became Russian enclave, but it has no border with Russia whatsoever. It borders Lithuania, Poland. Poland already changed its name to even Polish language. Russia has some problems with China as well, yeah. So there will be a time, there will be a reckoning of Russia with all these problems all at once, thanks to Ukraine and thanks to support that it got from international community, including NATO, including US. Now England is going to give long-range missiles to Ukraine. And U.S. responded that they will speed up delivery of Abrams tanks. So Ukraine is becoming a formidable, first-rate, perhaps the strongest European army today. So please take a note that it will be Russia who will experience on itself all might of Ukrainian army equipped with Western weapons. Hallelujah.
Wow. Guys, it's a pleasure. This is just incredible to be talking. I'm on my way to Carolina for an event, and sorry for I will be back on Monday for the opening of my monologue, but not to switch the topic, but I'm going to talk about it tomorrow, but how many of you watched the CNN town hall with Trump? And I think it's now they're saying there may be more lawsuits filed against him after what he said about the lady. But it just, this thing is just, I've never seen anything like this. I mean, it.
Steve,
anyway,
I only saw one clip, and I didn't understand why he talks to people like that, regardless of his policies. Why do you belittle people to their face? I don't get it. And I like a lot of what he does.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's just his personality or style.
Part of it is he is sometimes, and I don't know if Jacoby's got some thoughts, playing to his base, and sometimes that base is liking that style for whatever.
In the gutter?
Yeah, honestly, that's what they like. They're unapologetic, attacking, always just going at somebody. If you look at DeSantis, he's doing the same thing. That's what the base wants. And when, as a matter of fact, when he started attacking the reporter, always unapologetic and actually being very distasteful, the crowd that they had assembled cheered. When he does it at his rallies, they cheer him for doing that. So that's what they want.
I'm very supportive of his policies. Stick to that. The other stuff, it just turns me off.
Come on, Lee. There are no policies. When you're talking about Trump, forget about the word policy. This is a complete idiot, uneducated moron. That's what he is. He's a criminal. And a lot of people in America are criminals who are cheering for him. All these Proud Boys and those skippers, that's his audience. That's his people.
But I think this is, but here's the
6th.
Do you think, let me ask you this as an analyst, do you think that this is, I started thinking about this, and before we get to some other issues, and we're going to continue our talk about Ukraine as well. Mark, you're going to have to update on other world issues. I haven't been able to check my feeds this morning. But, the bottom line is that, do you think that this might be a play for the Democrats to put him up on CNN and he just goes rogue, like Lee said, and it just makes him even more unpopular? So we know that he's still probably going to be the nominee, but you got to be Joe Biden actually loving this, because I mean, if this is the way he's going to act in the general, I think Biden will win again. I think that's why Biden is running.
The really bad part about it, though, Steve, is that it wasn't a play for the liberals to throw him up there and say, "Hey, look at this clown." It was actually CNN who thought that they could control and regulate him and actually have a sensible debate and discussion with him. But that was you can't have a sensible debate with Trump. You can't have a discussion like that. That's the way he was in every single presidential election. That's the way he's always been. He's never going to change. He's an 80-year-old man. He's going to do
but it's quite scary. Look, for those of you, I know we have more conservative analysts on the show, and I have no problem with people having differences. I think Lee hit it on the nail. There's no problem of anyone having differences of opinion of policy. I have Republican supporters, independent supporters, but there's no reason to be derogatory and demeaning. And what's really scary is that, when you look at World War II, we often forget that, Hitler came to power when he was going to Germany, just like, we didn't lose the war. The surrender was forced on us, and people believe that, and that's what gave rise to the Third Reich. So you get people afraid, you scare them like this, and I tell you, it's just scary for the country.
That's how he won. That's how he won. That's how he won the presidency. He rode in on a wave of otherism, white flight or white fear. That's what he rode in on. That's who that's what he is. And he catered to a base that was fearful of Hispanic people coming into the country and taking the jobs. He was catered to a base that felt that black people were all on welfare and shooting up everybody. He catered to a base that, the Chinese people are getting us all sick. That's his base. That's who he catered to.
Toby, but he can continue that message, as distasteful as it is, without belittling that reporter.
But Lee, the problem is you can't continue that message. You're saying that it's okay for the president of the United States, the representative of everyone here, to tell me that I'm a thug because I'm black.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're right, Toby. I agree with you. My point was he could give that message, as distasteful as it is, without belittling the reporter to her face.
No. But Lee, you're missing my point. You can't.
I'm sorry.
You can't.
The one and the same?
You are the representative of our nation, of everybody here. As Steve is pointing out, it's understandable. Okay, if you like his policies, I completely disagree with his policies. If you like them, that's fine. And that's debatable. We can have that debate. But what we can't have is if he's retweeting white supremacists and you ignore that just because you like his policies.
No, I'm on board with what you're saying.
You're allowing that individual to propagate.
Joey's making a valid point.
Look, I hear the point you're making. Toby and Lee, I've got a question to ask, and it's actually based on a conversation that was on one of our other shows yesterday. It was actually after the show, but it was the guest who was a business leader and was on Barbara's show. And afterwards, we were talking about white women and their voting, and so they sometimes vote against their interests. And what the young lady said, Nicole, and I'm trying to remember her last name and everything, was that she really felt that they oftentimes will vote that way because they want to be seating next to the seat of power. So there are some folks that are intentionally voting against their interests, because that is what I've heard as a conversation point, that some of these women are voting totally against their interests because he's definitely not been supportive of women's rights in a lot of ways, but they are doing it because they want to be next to that position of power. And we've definitely.
But that is their interest. That is their motive. People do that. That's what lobbyists try to get politicians to do. Vote against whatever you normally would because I'm giving you money because for whatever reason.
You have black people voting for Trump, and he has been against a lot of African American policies. Or policies that would help the African American community. You have just tons of individuals voting for Trump based on a myriad of reasons. They want to be next to him. They think he's famous. He's not a normal politician. He's unapologetic. So it's just.
But how much of that is smoke? How much of that is smoke and mirrors, to your point and Lee's point? Because you can think that you're going to get next to the seat of power, but they don't oftentimes always give you that seat. They may claim that they're going to give you that seat, but how close do you really get?
It's all smoke and mirrors.
I'm going to tell you something. You underestimate the fact that because of his base, who's supporting him regardless what he does or what he says, so they're feeding of each other. Trump is feeding his base and the base is feeding him, and he's becoming stronger and stronger. And by the way, this interview, outrageous on CNN, it helped him a big deal. He's still getting more points.
Yeah.
He still is doing quite well in poll. He has no chances to win general election, but he has great chances to be a Republican nominee.
Yeah, I think
And that will
the other
start
thing.
the
Yeah,
end of the Republican Party. That's it.
I do think part of his message, and I'm going to end today on Title 42, but then we're going to talk about it on Monday, and I'm going to be doing it on radio this afternoon on PTF, so it'll be good practice for me. But you know, at the end of the day, I think that you know, he did have an economic message that I think played to this, you know, fact that we lost a lot of jobs, we're going to make America great again, kind of targeting the urban elite. I think the Democrats kind of got sleeping at the wheel, and after 8 years of Obama, and this guy came in as a Republican who hadn't really been a Republican a long time and just won this election. But then I think we found out who the real Donald Trump was, and the fact that, you know, he didn't condone white supremacy. I mean, condoned it. You know, kept saying that these, you know, migrants coming in, all of them are rapists, all of them are murderers. You know, mocking.
Steve never used the word all. The rest of the statement is true. We never used the word all.
Not all. I mean, but yeah. I mean, just just in general, right? I mean,
Well,
so
Steve, you're touching on a great point. I mean, yes, he had historically speaking, the Democrat Party has never had back-to-back presidents. If you look through all of our history, the Democrat Party has never had a 8-year president and then another Democrat president come in right behind them. Never happened. So he was already riding a wave. And then on top of that, you look, I mean, it's just the history and nature of our politics. So people are already looking for something different outside of the Democrat Party in the first place. Then you run into the tribalism. People had, I mean, Trump was in the middle of the whole campaign leading up to 2016, and he was literally retweeting white supremacist propaganda. But people ignored it and fought it and defended it. And the reason they did that, again, some liked his populist message. Some liked his policies and were willing to ignore because we were falling into these tribalistic silos. And because we fall into these tribalistic silos, when the Republican Party is animated because they're coming in behind a Democrat president, and honestly, Obama did a phenomenal job. And if you look at the policies and the way the country was going, yes, you can be upset about whatever policies, but if you look at how they worked, a lot of them were good. Yes, some of them were bad, but a lot of them were good, and the country was actually doing really well. However, because the Republican Party has a great messaging system, they really, I mean, they have trained their individuals. They really can push out a message. And as much as, again, take for instance the message that all media is left wing. Well, truthfully, if you look behind it, the individuals that own most of the media, especially local media, are conservatives. So the actual media companies and the media entities are more conservative. The biggest viewership is on Fox News. Fox News is conservative. So you have these bigger viewers, and so the mainstream media that became a talking point lived on and pushed through. So with the Republican Party having a great messaging system, coming behind a Democrat president that was 8 years in, you're going to have the winds behind you if you are a Republican. And as Trump went through and became this bombastic, yelling, people were overlooking this because it was fun. It was awesome. It was, this is the way I want my president to be. I want him to stand up. And for some people, that's what it was, is that he was going to stand up.
Yeah, I think I'm not trying to justify what he's done, any of his behavior, but we have to look at the reasons he came in, right? I mean, you had manufacturing towns all across America decimated after decades and decades of NAFTA and free trade agreements. So you had a president that came in and said, look, you know, I'm going to come in and bring jobs back to America. We're going to make America great. Illegal immigrants are coming in. They're taking all these jobs. They're driving up our healthcare costs and subliminally selling we're a white country. You know, we got to bring it back. You know, I mean,
that's a
sort of
big thing right there.
What?
What you just said was a very big thing. And honestly, I hate to say it again, with Obama as president, you had a black man leading the country, and for a lot of people, it's the same reason why it's tough for a woman still to become president, because you have a lot of people that live in the old mindset in the old times, and you cannot have a black man as president. And so when you ride this wave, and that's a piece that Trump used to ride a wave, white fear, otherism. They're coming for you. This black man should never have been in charge, and blah, blah, blah. You had all that, and he gave his megaphone to a lot of that hate. And that's why you have the Proud Boys who will support him. Because in all honesty, the Proud Boys weren't going to vote for a Mike Pence. They weren't going to vote for a Mitt Romney. But they'll vote for a Trump because Trump.
Toby, hold on a second. Toby and Steve, got a question for you, both of you, and actually Lee had.
And then we're going to go to the next issue in a minute. We're going to do Title 42.
Tied into this as well, because Lee may have some thoughts about this also. But I hear what y'all are saying, but there is another voice that I don't know that we are giving them their just dues and everything, and that's not just locally or even nationally, but internationally, because there is also a rising youth voice that is out there and everything. We're seeing that in Thailand, where there are actually some youthful folks that are actually pushing to have a change in a military dominated regime, and all in that space. So they are using social media to speak their piece. I would argue in a lot of ways, and Sasha may agree with me, he may not, but a lot of the resistance in Ukraine is very much youth-based and everything. So are we given enough due to this youth voice that is out there globally and is definitely stepping into its own light and everything? But Lee, you and
Mark,
in the political front.
I missed something. What did you say about resistance in Ukraine?
I think that it's very much youth dominated. I think it has a lot of youth people that are behind it.
Yeah, first, I want to just comment on what Steve said before, justifying why a lot of people voted for Trump. There's a I think it's viral, a video clip. Michael Moore, it's like 5 years old or whatever. I posted the link in the chat where he's saying why people were voting for Trump. This is back in 2016. If y'all haven't seen it, you should see it. It's an amazing clip, and it's pretty spot on. Now, Mark, in terms of what you were saying, in terms of the youth, that's universal, I think, where it's the youth who push back, whether in America during the Vietnam War era, or, in Hong Kong with, a number of years ago, it was the youth, or in China with Tiananmen Square. It's always the youth. That's who give the hope for the country, because they have a lot invested in what's going on. A lot of adults, they're already part of the system, whether their jobs are at stake, their families, they're, sit down and shut up. But the youth feel they have nothing to lose. Chatovi, or do you want to say something?
Oh, I think the youth are very motivated and very active. And
as they should be.
And statistically speaking, well, before we get to that, what Michael just want to touch on, I had already seen the Michael Moore thing, and what Michael Moore is correct. Yeah, I mean, there were tons of reasons why people voted for Trump. There was also the reason, the anti-vote, where people would vote against the Democratic Party because Bernie Sanders, you had the Bernie Bros that were built at that time. And people were so apathetic with, oh, well, we got this guy and we didn't want this guy. We wanted this guy, which is just idiotic. But in terms of the youth vote is very active. The sad part is, and this is where the statistics come into play, in which there's a lot of movement on the Republican Party. Statistically, the youth vote actually leans Democratic. And the GOP, actually, there was a released tape where one of the head of the GOP election committee, I forget her name, she is actually talking about how they can take away the youth vote by doing the voter ID laws to remove college IDs, so people cannot utilize their college ID to vote, take away the closer campuses or the closer entities where kids from campus can walk over and vote, ballots and a whole bunch of stuff.
By the time kids are in college, they already have driver's license, do they not, most of them?
So the problem with that is that a lot of the voter ID laws end up harming particular voting demographics, and that's how they were used. That's
How
how
is that?
they were used.
How would it harm any demographic? I just don't understand.
So, in terms of, say, for example, the older Black demographic, a lot of them don't end up having an actual ID. So, if you put in a voter ID, your older Black individuals or minority community can
Right.
no longer vote. They lean Democratic.
You can't vote. Yeah.
I mean, this is something I never
Yeah.
understood. Why can't the voting, when you show up, just bring your documents, and they issue a federal document that gives you a voter ID?
Because they've
No fee.
Well, the problem is, again, voter ID has always been utilized as a tool to suppress particular demographics from voting and having the ability to vote. That's always been the
And
problem.
I think,
with voter ID law.
yeah, and I've spoken on this issue before. I mean, I think part of the problem is that many people assume that I often get asked by even my Republican friends, well, why can't you have an ID? You have an ID to get a plane flight. You have an ID to book a hotel. You have an ID to do this. Well, guess what? Those are transactions. The difference is voting is a constitutional right. And so by imposing ID, like Jacoby said, you're depriving that right to other people. And so it is a strategy. Let's make no mistake. It's to minimize that vote to win elections. Like I said, politics is a gladiator sport. And I think this is going to affect the North Carolina elections that's why I'm concerned about Josh Stein now becoming governor, because think about it. You've got a Black man running for lieutenant governor. Now you're going to make it harder for that older Black demographic to vote. And guess what? Mark Robinson wins 15% of the Black vote. He's the 76th governor of, he's the 77th governor of North Carolina. And the first Black to win. Yeah.
And the crazy part about it, the Republican Party will push Mark Robinson as, hey, we are an inclusive party, yet they're not going to talk about what Mark Robinson has said about how the Black people should thank white people for freeing them from slavery and all this other stuff, which is a racist comment. But all the other stuff he's talking about, his bigotry towards the LGBTQIA community. I mean, just Mark Robinson is a very, 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 he's our Herschel Walker, but they're going to push him as the token Black guy. And look, we like Black people. Come vote for us. You guys have a white person run it. That's going to be, and I hate to say it that way, but that's the way that the GOP
and also the other card, which has never been tested, and a Jewish man.
Yes.
So let's also forget a Jewish has never become the governor of North Carolina, and that's going to be the big test.
Mark Robinson's Jewish?
No.
Josh Stein is Jewish.
Josh Stein is.
Yeah.
But the other question I'm curious about is,
I'll be right back, guys. Don't leave.
No problem.
Okay, Mark, just real quick, Toby, I want to ask him a question. Are you familiar with Larry Elder?
Yes, I know Larry Elder.
I believe he's a big supporter of Donald Trump.
Yeah, Larry Elder is just another Candace Owens kind of guy.
He's a very bright guy. He's not stupid.
That doesn't mean anything. Larry Elder has been preaching a lot of bad things. Just because he's Black doesn't make him right. Or he's actually attacked the Black community tons of times. Larry Elder is not somebody as a that in the Black community we look at as a representative of the Black community.
Hey,
Thomas Sowell?
Just tell me a quick question before you get to Thomas Sowell is how important do you think it is going to be in our local election, the evangelistic vote? Because I do know that there's a strong amount of even Black evangelists that might be migrating toward Mark Robinson, despite some of his views and everything.
That's that younger demographic battle. The younger demographic is less in that evangelical arena.
Mm-hmm.
Statistically speaking, they're less in that arena than the older demographic. That evangelical vote, because of the voter suppression that's being put into play at this very moment, from the gerrymandering all the way up to the voter ID stuff and so on and so forth, all that's going to come into play. The evangelical vote will play a role just because they're going to try and sell the whole abortion issue as this is what God wanted. and God this and God that. So they're going to push the evangelical vote out as much. I mean, that's their base. That is the Republican base.
I don't know if you had a thought about the Thomas Sowell comment and everything, or the question.
Yeah, Mark, one other comment. I actually emailed you this morning. Glenn Laurie, if you guys don't know who he is, the professor at Brown University, put out a clip, I believe it was yesterday. You got to watch. It's about 5 minutes long. It might be too long to do it on the show, but it's your call, Mark.
Well, I was actually going to play the Michael Moore clip right now, and that's
about
okay. Great.
Here's a question.
Take the other one for next week.
With Glenn Laurie, what is Glenn Laurie talking about?
He's talking about. This is my recollection: how the black community is shooting itself in the foot, in terms of not speaking out about the youth being accountable for their actions.
So this is another reason why, again, not a representative of the black community, because what he's playing on is the same thing: the black on black crime.
I hear what you're saying.
Bad. The black.
I hear your point.
But that's what he's playing on, and what does that play into? Every white supremacist talking.
Jacoby, are you saying though he's not sincere?
I'm saying he's not sincere.
You got to see the clip then. Okay, Mark,
the reason being, let me explain. So he's saying, if you're saying that, if he is saying that, the black community is not speaking out about the youth, well, he doesn't know the black community, because there are a lot of things within the community.
In fairness, you know what? Let's have this conversation after you watch the clip. I can send it to you if you want. I sent it to Mark already.
And I'll take a look at the clip and everything. But to Toby's point, there are folks even in the African American community that are doing work in that space. I know for a fact that Leonardo Williams has done a lot of work with the black youth right here in Durham. But that, unfortunately, it is not given the same kind of play that other things are given and everything. So there's a lot of times that it is happening. It is happening very effectively, but the media, for whatever reasons, does not want to cover it.
Well, it's not only that, but a big thing is that is exactly what is used to say the black community is horrible. It degrades and demeans the black community without actually looking at all the community things that are being done by not only those within the community, but the youth within that community. So it is not a thing that you can say is sincere when he's playing on the black on black crime trope that's out there. And just to explain, when people use this black on black crime trope, it's only a racist view, because white on white crime is just as prevalent as black on black crime. Hispanic on Hispanic crime is just as prevalent as black on black crime. So when we only point to one community saying their crime rate is so high against themselves and they don't take ownership, we never, ever hear anybody talk about the white on white crime, which is just as prevalent. We never hear anybody talk about the fact that most mass shootings are done by white individuals. We never talk about this stuff. And we never talk about how, why doesn't the white community take into account all the mass shooters or all the shootings or all the rapes or all the domestic violence cases or all this? We only talk about, the black community only doesn't do anything about itself. Well, you're forgetting that it's not true, because crime amongst the individuals within their certain community is prevalent all across the board. It is the same all across the board. So what we should talk about, which I think it was Dyson who talks about it, I'll see if I can find that clip for you. Dyson talks about what we should call it is a neighborhood crime or community crime, because these communities, all communities have crimes against themselves. And that's what we should look at. How do we cut down on community crime? Because again, white on white crime is just as high as black on black crime. But how can we affect white on white crime just as we affect black on black crime, Hispanic on Hispanic crime, just all the other different communities within our nation, rather than focusing, hey, black on black crime is bad. That's been a trope for years. Heck, that's what Cops, the show Cops, had to change their actual habits, because Years ago, the only thing they showed were cops arresting black people. That's it.
Why would they do that?
Because that's that systemic, institutionalized, historic racism that has always been within our country. And we are fighting it, and we're in the death rattles of it. Hence the reason why Trump and Palin were born, because they have been pushing and giving a megaphone to it. So and this goes back to, in terms of, you can like his policies, we can debate the policies, but when you ignore the other parts of it, just because you go for his policies, that means you're telling me that if David Duke or a Klansman had an economic policy that you liked, you'll vote for that David Duke or Klansman just because that. But you forget that when Trump pushes out this white supremacist propaganda, it tells those white supremacists that it's okay to beat up these black people. It's okay to degrade these Hispanic individuals that are searching for some type of, they're running for their own freedom, and we should support them. No, we shouldn't do that. They're trash. They're this, and they're trying to take your jobs. That's why everything about a president you have to take into account, not only the economic policies, but his actual, what he talks about just day to day. If you're tweeting out white supremacist propaganda, for me, and I wish it were, everybody would have that same viewpoint, but no, I'm okay. It's okay to have discussions on policies and stuff. But I think there are certain things that we should be able to look at and say, that is a line that I can never cross, and he's out. He's never going to get my vote because he did this. I mean, heck, Trump even defended, he tweeted out a video where a guy yelled out white power.
I didn't see that. If you find it, send it to me. I didn't see that one.
He defended it, then deleted it.
Yeah, that's a slick little move.
Hey, Mark, did you want to get to the video?
I don't know if we're going to have enough time, so I may say, well, actually,
they're both around 5 minutes, either the Glenn Laurie one or the Michael Moore. They're both around 5 minutes.
Yeah, they're both about 5 minutes, so let's do the Michael Moore one, and then I'll bring Steve up for the closeout. So let's go to Michael Moore.
Donald Trump came to the Detroit Economic Club and stood there in front of the Ford Motor executives and said, if you close these factories as you're planning to do in Detroit and build them in Mexico, I'm going to put a 35% tariff on those cars when you send them back, and nobody's going to buy them. It was an amazing thing to see. No politician, Republican or Democrat, had ever said anything like that to these executives. And it was music to the ears of people in Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, the Brexit states. You live here in Ohio, you know what I'm talking about. Whether Trump means it or not is kind of irrelevant, because he's saying the things to people who are hurting. And it's why every beaten down, nameless, forgotten working stiff who used to be part of what was called the middle class loves Trump. He is the human Molotov cocktail that they've been waiting for. The human hand grenade that they can legally throw into the system that stole their lives from them. And on November 8th, Election Day, although they lost their jobs, although they've been foreclosed on by the bank, next came the divorce, and now the wife and kids are gone, the car's been repoed, they haven't had a real vacation in years, they're stuck with the shitty Obamacare bronze plan where you can't even get a fucking Percocet. They've essentially lost everything they had, except one thing. The one thing that doesn't cost them a cent and is guaranteed to them by the American Constitution, the right to vote. They might be penniless, they might be homeless, they might be fucked over and fucked up. It doesn't matter, because it's equalized on that day. A millionaire has the same number of votes as the person without a job. One. And there's more of the former middle class than there are in the millionaire class. So on November 8th, the dispossessed will walk into the voting booth, be handed a ballot, close the curtain, and take that lever or felt pen or touchscreen and put a big fucking X in the box by the name of the man who has threatened to upend and overturn the very system that has ruined their lives. Donald J. Trump. They see that the elites who ruined their lives hate Trump. Corporate America hates Trump. Wall Street hates Trump. The career politicians hate Trump. The media hates Trump after they loved him and created him and now hate him. Thank you, media. The enemy of my enemy is who I'm voting for on November 8th. Yes, on November 8th, you, Joe Blow, Steve Blow, Bob Blow, Billy Bob Blow, all the blows get to go and blow up the whole goddamn system because it's your right. Trump's election is going to be the biggest fuck you ever recorded in human history. And it will feel good. For a day. Yeah, maybe a week. Possibly a month. And then, like the Brits, who wanted to send a message, so they voted to leave Europe, only to find out that if you vote to leave Europe, you actually have to leave Europe. And now they regret it. All the Ohioans, Pennsylvanians, Michiganders, and Wisconsinites of Middle England, right? They all voted to leave, and now they regret it, and over 4 million of them have signed a petition to have a do-over. They want another election. It ain't going to happen because you use the ballot as an anger management tool. And now you're fucked. And the rest of Europe, they're like, bye, Felicia. So when the rightfully angry people of Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin find out after a few months in office that President Trump wasn't going to do a damn thing for them, it'll be too late to do anything about it. But I get it. You wanted to send a message. You had righteous anger and justifiable anger. Well, message sent. Good night, America. You've just elected the last president of the United States.
Well, that was that video, and definitely.
I've got to Mark, I got to close out because I'm leaving, so I wanted to thank you for. We're going to talk about that video because I think it was well spoken, and I think does bring a lot of things that Jacoby and all of us talked about of what's really going on in America. It's a culture where it's an older nation that's also become a more diverse nation, and I think that's really created a system where there's so many people, as Richard Nixon once said, the silent majority that are in the rural areas of this country that do not support the policies of many of the urban Democrats. And I do believe, and I truly believe, that's why Josh Stein is in danger of losing this election, because I think in North Carolina is going to be a very similar shock unless he makes changes. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Josh Stein, but I do believe that there is going to be a huge upset on the horizon with Mark Robinson. And I think they're underestimating him. He's a black Trump, and he's going to do to North Carolina what Michael Moore has said Trump did to America. On that note, I want to say that Title 42 expired on May 11th, last night at midnight. This policy, which we will talk about on Monday, enabled our immigration services to expel immigrants and return them back to their respective countries because of a public health emergency. President Biden tried to repeal it. It stayed in, and the court upheld it. And now it expires because the public health emergency has expired. When we return to the show on Monday, we are going to be bringing them guests about what does this mean for the future of the border. thousands of troops are being sent to help these immigrants. We're going back to Title VIII, where it can be criminal to cross the border for those seeking asylum. But hundreds and hundreds of thousands of immigrants are now going to be coming in, migrants on the border, and this is a huge crisis. Senator Sinema and Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina have proposed a bill that would allow the expulsion of these migrants without having a public health emergency. I reached out to Senator Tillis, and we'll try to bring him on the show in a few days, hopefully. And we'll be talking about Title 42 American immigration policy, and of course, the return of Donald Trump as possibly the next president of the United States if he does beat Joe Biden. Thank you all for being with us, and I will be back on Monday for another edition of World Edition. Be safe wherever you are. Thank you.
You guys next week. Take care. Thanks for the homework, Chitovi.